Hello, studio artists. Today we are going to be talking about finally adding materials to our accordion book. So first things first, I just wanted to kind of walk you through mine if you're still struggling with where to place things. Mine is a light line drawing, so some of the pieces you might not see as well, but I'm going to kind of walk you through it so you get an example. So my page will be sitting up like this, but I want to show it to you, so I'm laying down. My intro page, I'm having my first name, Katie. Second page, I'm doing line, so I'm using a tree to symbolize my love of nature, also this like connection with family roots, and so I'm going to have lots of lines to make up this tree. It's going to have some, like nice different types of line used. Moving into my next page, I have shape, so I chose to use the earth. I'm very connected with the earth, so for that I'm going to use a lot of very flat colors, green and blue, so it looks like flat shapes together. You might notice that I have the earth kind of spilling out onto my line page and my form page. I might, for those parts, make more line areas to make it connect to the line page, or I might keep it all shaped, but I like kind of breaking the boundaries of the edge of the page. That's completely up to you. Next one, I have form. For me, I decided to go with a book because I love reading. It's very 3D the way I'm going to shade it. And then what I have coming out of the book is going to be this kind of blobby cloud-like form. So I'm going to make it look really 3D with the way that I shade it. Moving into space, once again, the page is kind of spilling over. I'm doing something with mountains and a path. I love hiking, and I just love the open air. That will then turn into my value page where I have some mountains that will trickle in, and I'm going to focus on mainly the background. The sky will be dark down near the bottom, and as it approaches the sun, it'll get a lot lighter, so you're going to see lots of shading in there to give it a lot of value and show some difference between the area where the mountains are all the way up to the sky. Next one, I have color. I'm going to do something similar, but with lots of colors. It's going to be kind of like rainbow, really bright, to symbolize my happiness. You might notice part of one of my cats is on this page, so he's going to be very colorful. I'm choosing my orange cat. And then my texture page, I have 2 cats and 2 dogs, so I have one for each just to symbolize it. And I'm going to try and get a lot of the fur texture with those. My last page, my last name, Mally, to finish it off. So now that I've done my pencil drawing, it's time for me to start thinking of what materials I might want to use on the surface. So the things that you can choose from, we're going to do a mini lesson, like super quick, on colored pencil, graphite drawing, watercolor, Sharpie, and collage. You can use one of them, you can use 2 of them, you can use all of them. It's really up to you, but think about what would work best. So like for me, for my cat and dog with the texture page, watercolor, which can be very soft and flowy, I'm not going to use it because I want more control. So for me, that's probably going to be more colored pencil. If you have something where you want like really bold lines, like for me, the tree, Sharpie might be a better idea. So start kind of thinking what makes sense for you, and we'll go through them real quick. We'll start with the most basic. Graphite drawing pencils. You've probably used these before. They come in different hardnesses of the graphite. So anything in the H family, so this one says 4H, that means that it is a lighter pencil. And this one is 2B. This one is kind of in between. And then the last one is 6B, which is the most bold pencil, the darkest pencil. So just when you're shading, if I create a form, right, with my lighter pencil, it barely shows up. And then if I want to go in and do some shading, I can do that with the side of my graphite pencil. Now, this paper that we're using is harder. It's a watercolor paper, so you might see the texture showing through. That might be good for you, but you can also get rid of that by using a tortillon. Basically, this is rolled up paper. They're also known as blending stumps. And you can start pushing a little bit harder to kind of blend it in. Once you get some of the pigment on that paper, like I have here, or the graphite, I can actually start shading with that too. So it's a way that you can kind of like get the value. Graphite is really good for that. If I wanted to go in and use an eraser as a tool as well, I can actually go and take away the pigment too. Negatives of graphite, it does smudge a little bit, so just be cautious when you use it, not to touch it a lot with your hands because you will get it on your fingers. And if I want serious darkness, that 6B pencil, the most bold, would be great. Maybe I go back at the end and I do some outlining, so it's really, really well developed. Graphite, done. Colored pencils. I'm sure you've all used them before. We have a ton of different ones, so if you get a set and you're missing some, just ask. The beauty of colored pencils is you can shade really dark and get a really solid coat. You can also go a lot lighter to get more of like a background or a lighter shade. Personally, I love layering colors. I think it makes it more rich with your colored pencil. So just by taking this kind of cooler purple and then the warmer purple and putting them together, I'm creating a whole new color. Now, if I wanted something that's more light like this, I could keep it. Maybe I want to go back and do some outlining. I can do that as well. Colored pencils do also work with the blending stump. So if you'd like to smear your colors together a little more, you can do that just to get a little bit more of a unified shade. You can erase a little bit. You cannot erase everything with colored pencil. So just to be aware, it's a little more permanent. And you can do lots of different details with it. All right, Sharpie. Pretty self-explanatory what you can do with them. Mostly we have the just the fine Sharpies. We do have some ultra fine, so ask if you're looking for something else. Sharpie, the cool thing is you can get a really bold, consistent color. You cannot layer your colors as well. So if I were to take yellow and put it over blue, not really gonna work, but I can put things next to one another. You also cannot erase with Sharpie, so it's more permanent. This is a good one where if you have a sketch that you did in pencil, you can take your Sharpie and go back over it and add details. The nice thing is if I go off of my line of my pencil at all, I can go back, erase the pencil, and the Sharpie's gonna stay just fine. So Sharpie's pretty basic, but it's a great way to get some bold details. You can do Sharpie over top of graphite and colored pencil. So if you wanna have some really strong lines, that's another great trick. Watercolor. Watercolor is the one I want you to be really cautious of if you're choosing to use it. It's very easy to ruin your whole project with too much watercolor. So be really mindful how you use it. And the goal with this is not a lot of water because water warps your paper. So I have my water, I have my watercolors here. I already did this as like a light wash. So let's say I'm looking at my page and behind my tree, I'd like to have a blue sky before I add linear details to show it. I can take my paintbrush, I can take a tiny bit of water, so just a little bit, find the blue I want. Remember, you can blend colors too up in the top. So if I'd like to have something that's a little more blended, I can do that as well. And then because we don't want a lot of water, I'm actually gonna take, and I would do this on a paper towel, but I'm gonna wipe a little bit off because I really don't want too much water in this space. Okay, so now I've got a really light color that I've created. I'm gonna go and place that on my piece. If you know, like I'm gonna go back with Sharpie or dark colored pencil over this. So to me, it's okay if the color goes into the tree because I know that once it dries, I can go over the top of it. If you notice, I'm being really careful not to put a lot of water on, and I'm just taking my time. Now, the other negative with watercolor is if I take and go back and forth with my paintbrush over and over the same spot, it's gonna start tearing up your paper. So just be really thoughtful. If you're choosing to use watercolor, be really mindful of how much you're using. So now I've got my blue background. Once that dries, now I can do stuff over the top. The other way that you can use watercolor is with a thinner brush. You can do more detail work. So I have a very thin brush. I put a tiny bit of water on it. I'm gonna grab, just to show you how dark you can go, I'll grab the black, okay? I'm wiping off any extra water I have. And now I can go over what I've already done and I can do more detail work. So you can see I'm getting pretty crisp lines. If I wanted it to look like specific petals of grass, maybe I grab some of the green. Remember, not a lot of water, and I can start adding those in. So 2 ways to use watercolor, be super cautious, and obviously if you use watercolor in a period, we're not gonna just instantly fold that back up again or you're gonna smear it all over. Last one, I can't believe we're here. This is probably my favorite one, but I think it's really up to you whether you're interested in using it. Collage. So this is a way that you can take magazines, things that exist, and you can start to cut cool things out that make sense to you. So one way to do it is to look for things like, here's a tree. Maybe I want to cut this out with an X-Acto knife instead of actually drawing a tree. If that's what I want to do. So I have X-Acto knives. If that's what you're interested in doing, like cutting out a very detailed shape, let me know and I will get you a knife so you can start working on that. But for me, I ended up liking this kind of texture here. So I just cut out this little piece. I could turn this into whatever I wanted. So if I wanted this to be like the trunk of my tree, I could take it and cut a very detailed shape. I also could keep it just the way it is. Maybe a rectangle with that texture makes a lot of sense. But it's as simple as taking what you have, just cutting out the shape you want, and then gluing it on. In addition to magazines for this, I have newspaper. So if for you it makes sense to have paper with a lot of words on it, you can use that. I also have tissue paper. So the beautiful thing about tissue paper is you can rip it, you can put some glue down on your paper. So I'm gonna put a little blob right here. I can press it down. And if I want to, I can make sure all of the edges are really down, or I can kind of leave them up depending on what your goal is. Do you want it to look like leaves on a tree? You might notice that where it layers over the blue, you can kind of see through. So it's a way to build depth. You also can crinkle and shape and form things, put a little glue down, and so that way you can make a super textured page. And for that, you might need some thicker glue. So collage would be the last one. So you have lots of options as you are finishing up and starting to add color and dimension to your pieces. We have Sharpie, we have watercolor, we have collage, we have graphite, and we have colored pencil. So I look forward to seeing what you choose. Take your time with it. We've got a ton of time to work on this.